Michael Turner turned the key in the door of his empty apartment one final time. After the job, the savings, and finally the house had all slipped away, one thing remained that truly mattered to him: his 8-year-old daughter, Emma. Every vow he'd made to her rested on a single conviction. No matter how hard things got, they'd get through it side by side. Just months before, Michael had held a respected management role at one of Seattle's biggest food corporations. His boss, Daniel Reeves, pinned a failed project on him without ever digging into what actually happened. Despite years of dedicated work, Michael was let go right in front of his colleagues. The humiliation stung, but he wouldn't let resentment steer his path forward. Struggling to land another management role, he took whatever temporary work came his way. One afternoon, while dropping off supplies in a quiet part of town, he spotted a forgotten bakery, dusty windows, a faded for sale sign leaning in front. Something about the little shop stirred memories of childhood mornings spent baking bread beside his grandmother. With what remained of his severance and a modest loan from a local credit union, Michael bought the rundown bakery. Friends thought he'd lost his mind, but Emma just smiled as they swept up broken shelving together. "It already feels warm in here," she murmured. Her quiet confidence gave him the strength to start over. The early weeks tested him hard. The aging ovens kept failing. Hardly any customers came through the door, and bills piled up faster than income. Every day before dawn, Michael kneaded dough by hand while Emma finished her homework in a corner booth before heading to school. Bit by bit, neighbors began noticing the smell of fresh bread and warm cinnamon rolls drifting down the street. Michael welcomed every single customer like they were family. When an older neighbor couldn't pay for breakfast, he'd slip an extra loaf into their bag without a word. Teachers got free coffee on their way to class, and firefighters were greeted with warm pastries after long night shifts. Generosity became the shop's real secret ingredient, and news of it traveled fast across the city. Within a year, Turner's Bakery had become one of Seattle's most beloved local spots. Weekend lines stretched down the block, newspapers wrote glowing pieces about the homemade recipes, and online reviews praised Michael's warmth as much as his baking. The shop everyone had written off had turned into a symbol of hope, proof that kindness could build something stronger than greed ever could. One drizzly afternoon, the bell above the door rang, and Michael glanced up from behind the counter. There, dressed in a sharp suit, stood Daniel Reeves, the very boss who'd fired him. Daniel had no clue whose bakery this was. He'd only stopped in after hearing people rave about the city's best bread. Their eyes locked. Daniel's face flushed with recognition and shame. Michael simply greeted him the way he greeted everyone. Daniel lowered his gaze and admitted that letting Michael go had been the company's worst decision. Once the truth behind the failed project finally came out, the board realized Michael had taken the blame for something that wasn't his fault. Daniel confessed the company had been struggling since: sinking morale, weak leadership, several key people walking out the door. He offered Michael his old world back, an executive title, a generous salary, everything he'd once lost. It was an offer built on money and status. Michael looked around at his bustling little bakery, where neighbors sipped coffee and laughed together, and Emma happily handed warm cookies to customers waiting in line. He smiled softly and said, "I already found the life I used to pray for. I don't need a corner office. I need to keep doing work that brings people closer together." Daniel nodded quietly, understanding. Before he left, he offered a genuine apology for judging Michael so unfairly, so quickly. Michael accepted it without a trace of bitterness, believing forgiveness was worth far more than getting even. Watching Daniel walk off with a warm loaf tucked under his arm, Michael thought about how real success isn't measured in titles or profit margins. It's measured in the lives you touch through honesty and kindness. That evening, Michael and Emma locked up the bakery together as the sun sank behind Seattle's skyline. She wrapped her arms around him and asked if he ever missed his old job. He just smiled and shook his head. Sometimes losing everything is what clears the way towards something even better. Together, they flipped off the lights, thankful that hope, in the end, had risen higher than any loaf of bread they'd ever baked.